Good afternoon, everyone. This is Frank Donaldson, and would like to welcome you to class number 5 in the University of Dayton ISPD online classroom. We are presenting this class number 5 from Cecina Memorial High School in Indianapolis, where we are presently working with this high school in a number of areas, and want to thank Joe Thurber, the president, and the advancement staff for allowing us to get squared away here and online. Once again, we want to welcome everyone. As we will say many, many times, this is recorded and will be sent out to you afterwards. And we have several other announcements as we move on through. Today's lesson, we actually are going to be delving into 4 lessons from the book. And these 4 lessons, actually the 4th one, will begin part 1 of the enrollment management piece, which we hope that you will find useful. In fact, we'll be sharing some information that actually is not in the book. So let us begin, as we always do, with prayer, and let us remember we're in God's holy presence. Dear Lord and Father of all, thank you for today. Thank you for ways in which you provide for us all. For your protection and love, we thank you. Help us to focus our hearts and minds now on what we are about to learn and discuss. Inspire us by your Holy Spirit as we listen and discern. Guide us by your eternal light as we discover more about the world of Catholic development and more about the world around us. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. So as we begin this particular class, obviously always put these housekeeping slides and review slides up on the screen, and once again going through a little bit of what we have covered. Actually, we have covered a lot of information as we look at these first 3 lessons in class 1 and the next 2 lessons in class number 2. In fact, you'll notice today in one of the lessons, I'm going to move fairly quickly through it because we covered a lot of this in lesson 5. But in class number 3, we begin to really spend a lot of time on lesson number 7 and building those relationships with your school families. And then in class number 4, being able to talk about the core team, and we've had a lot of input about that. And hopefully what we sent you has been helpful. And then obviously the assessment of your development efforts. The homework assignment was interesting in the fact that we mainly talked about 2 things, and that is how you are, quote unquote, pipelining to your people, meaning how are you seeking the input. And was really pleased to hear that many of you are doing surveys and questionnaires and seeking that input. There were about 25% that this is something new for you, and so hopefully what is in the book, and hopefully is some of the lessons that we have talked about, this will be helpful for you. I, once again, just want to encourage that. That ultimate question piece that is in that lesson in the book is we think, one of the best ones, that best survey instrument that can be done. And a lot of that is because it can be done anonymously and can be done online, as well as it can also be able to be something that you could do as a hard copy, quite possibly in a board meeting or whatever. So in terms of that, it was really interesting to take a look at the assessment and how people are assessing their development efforts. I would say that as we look at the assessment piece, that we probably have about 60 to 70% of the people who handed in the homework assignment that are really doing it well. And the only thing that I picked up on is that a number of the folks that are doing this assessment, a lot of it is being assessed in terms of the success of the development advancement efforts. I found that a lot of it was being assessed by dollars and in terms of how much money is raised by the development advancement effort, which is obviously a piece of the assessment. But I also found that as we take a look at it, there were also some areas that can also be looked at in the assessment, and that has to do with not just numbers in terms of dollars, but numbers in terms of people. And there were probably of the ones that came in on time, I was able to see that approximately 40% of you are really measuring your development advancement, marketing, enrollment management efforts, not just on dollars, but also in terms of people engagement. That was really encouraging, to hear. And in fact, there's one that I'd just like to share with you that I thought was really good. What ways are you able to measure success from year to year? And there are a number of measurements here that I'd like to just share with you. The number of people that we are in contact with, how often we reach out to people, how often we meet with individuals, not necessarily just to ask for money. The number of invitations that are made to invite financial giving. We obviously look at the increase in the annual fund, but both in terms of dollars and numbers of people. We do an evaluation of all of our events within a week of afterward that event is through. We take a look at the number of times our constituents are quote unquote touched throughout the year. And we take a look at that very closely. We take a look at what is coming into our website and how many quote unquote hits we have on our website. We take a look at, in terms of assessing and reviewing our open house, because we seek feedback from that, and we use that in our evaluation, even offering a survey at the end of open house to those who attend it. So I found that was a really good way to take a look at this. And on the flip side of that, there are a number of people, probably 25%, that I had this type of answer. What is done by the board and the principal is a financial analysis at the end of each year. And unfortunately, whereas some of our people do understand development, the majority do not understand, and they don't see that development advancement is very different than a fundraising event. The depth and reach we can achieve is underestimated and often overlooked, and so obviously our school is constantly looking for immediate results and not long-term goals that can be met. And I found that to be something that kind of permeated. Read a few more. Here's another one that talks about, that question in the homework: do you believe that the people doing the assessment have a really good understanding? And this one says, unfortunately, no. However, the principal did encourage me to take this class, and I sent that information out to other administrators and to board. And this person goes on to say, I feel that development at our school is more fundraising focused and not enough emphasis is put on the meaningful involvement of people. We have not expanded enough from the first ripple. We live in an area where people do not adjust well to change, and the quote unquote, we have always done it this way mentality pervades. Since the tone is set at the top, the education of our board and of our administration is really important in terms of making sure they understand what development is and what development is not, that it is not moving from one fundraising event to another. Another one, quite just the opposite, because like I said, we have a number of people that have taken this course, and they come from a number of different areas and have a number of different ideas and obviously different approaches. But this one I particularly liked in terms of moving in the right direction. What ways are you able to measure success from year to year? Well, we measure success on the more relationships we've made and the happiness that we have provided to students and alumni. For example, our annual fund came in a little under the goal, but we had the most donors in the past 10 years. We also made relationships that engaged our larger donors to give more and be more involved. The next way that we measure success is by improvements from the previous year. We benchmark from year to year. Everything has a folder on a share drive, and it's our goal to have as little complaints as possible. If there was something wrong with a prior event or process, a note is made in the folder, and come around the next year, we make sure we improve and do not make the same mistake. As far as people doing the assessment, answer is they have a good understanding. However, kind of tough to compare as we go through this class, because obviously we're bringing out some new things, but this certainly has the foundation and the look of a really good situation, it seems to me, in terms of that. Here's another one where the assessment is being done by, and I was really glad to hear this, the assessment is being done by the principal, by the development director, and there is a core team in place. And that is really that is ideal. And of course, if you can invite and involve your board members to be part of that, then obviously, if you have several of them on your core team, then that becomes the optimal situation for that to happen. Lastly, how are you able to measure success? And this one is pretty much one that we really would like to see more assessment on the people engagement end, but this one was really good because this particular school is taking a look at measuring success quantitatively in terms of amounts of money raised, but also the amount of people that are getting involved. And this particular school has cut back on a lot of the special event fundraising that seems to have stepped on the toes of development dollars efforts. And that is always good news to hear, because as I have said and we have talked about many times, the way to make sure all of this works well is when you are not doing one fundraising event after another fundraising event, and obviously that is when it becomes sometimes confusing for the donor. So as we look at this, once again, thank you for your homework assignments, and most of you getting them in on time. And as we take a look at today's class, we are going to really focus, as I said, on 4 lessons. We want to talk about the long-range strategic plan for your school. We want to talk about what are those things that you need to do to make sure your development/advancement director is set up to succeed. And then lesson 14, which we covered earlier, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it really does, it is a lesson that in the book when we wrote it, we wanted to make sure that we call this out with a lesson of its own, and that's creating the master plan for your fundraising events. And then number 15, we want to start, we're actually going to devote this class in class 6 to enrollment management. And so we want to start with part 1. And a couple of weeks ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Catholic schools in the Diocese of Buffalo. And so I'm going to share with you some of the things that we worked with them on. And this obviously grows out of the book, but I think there's some new things that quite possibly may be helpful. I think there are some new things that we can share with you as we take a look at those 2 words that I mentioned in the book, and that is critical mass. So let's take a look at this. When we talk about long-range strategic planning, we also use another name for it, which you'll hear me refer to as strategic growth plan. They basically mean the same thing. And by long-range strategic planning, strategic growth plan, we're talking about the entire Catholic school. We're not just talking about development. We're talking about the entire Catholic school. For many, many, many years, when we would work with the school on long-range strategic planning, we would actually divide that planning process into 9 areas: spiritual life, faculty and staff life, student life, academics, technology, athletics, leadership, governance and leadership, development/marketing, and facilities. So we'd divide that into those 9 areas. They kind of work well in triads, really, as you take a look at the life ones, spiritual life, student life, faculty, staff life. Then the others are kind of curriculum: academics, technology, athletics, curriculum, and co-curriculum. And then the others kind of deal with that operational vitality piece. And that is obviously administration, finance, and leadership, and facilities, and development/advancement/marketing. So those are those ways we look at. Now in terms of the NCEA and what's coming out of there and what is promoted there, and we use it a lot ourselves in working with schools now, kind of taking a look at a hybrid of those 9 areas. But as you know, mission and Catholic identity, academic excellence, governance and leadership, and operational vitality. Those are the 4 areas in terms of the benchmarks. So as you take a look at long-range strategic planning, we often say there are so many reasons for it, and a lot of it kind of goes back, as I'll in this particular lesson, you'll see in about 5 or 10 minutes, with talking about this whole idea of vision. And so there are different types of planning processes. There's the process that maybe you look at as strategic planning or long-range planning or school improvement planning. Some people call it the SIP process, where it's diocesan-driven. Or maybe there is state accreditation. Or maybe you're dealing with some type of regional or national accreditation agencies, such as Southern Association, such as North Central. Many times Catholic schools will do a 5-year plan that is driven by the board, that's driven by the council. And usually, one of the things that we see, and one of the things we promote, and one of the things that we see has such value, is you've got a wonderful opportunity, if you do this correctly, to do a long-range strategic plan that is really going to build a dynamic vision and plan for the future. And so with this, you can really engage people in that planning process. So the questions we ask is, as you can see in the book, do you want to approach strategic plan from a development stance? Now, once again, as we said earlier, development as the meaningful involvement of people. Do you want to approach it from that stance? Do you want to approach strategic planning from a let's get it done stance? Okay, we've been mandated to do it from the diocese or whatever, and do we need to just get it done? Do you want just to involve the leaders of the school in planning? Do you want to stay within that first ripple, so to speak? Are you going to seek input from those with whom you feel comfortable? Or are you going to take a look at reaching out to many people? Like here at Cecina Memorial High School, they did the ultimate question and continue to do it almost on a regular basis. And so they seek input from their parents, from their past parents, from their alums, from their students, from their board. They certainly seek that input. And as we've talked about before in that lesson that talks about input, many times you hear things that quite possibly make you feel uncomfortable. But I always ask the question, isn't that what you want to hear? Because really, real change does not take place unless there is some type of quote unquote friction. And that doesn't mean the friction or the conflict has to be negative. It just means that someone is raising awareness to something that needs correcting. And if you really follow the tenets of good management, you'll know that it's all built around those 2 words of continuous improvement. How do we continually improve what we do? So with our strategic planning that we teach and we work with, are you going to invite the first, second, and third ripples of people? As opposed to just dealing with that third bullet point, are you just going to involve the leaders of the school in planning? And so as we take a look at this, the planning processes that we teach and we become involved in actually involve hundreds of people. And so that is what we encourage. And as you can see, we ask that question of why limit the input to people who are already, subjective. In other words, your faculty and staff are subjective. Why not invite experts from different fields? And people will say yes. That's one of the things. Will people get involved? And we've seen over and over and over again. I mean, here at Cecina, back a couple of years ago, we had a Congress in which over 100 people attended. Several schools we've just wrapped up long-range planning with. At Archbishop Moeller High School in Cincinnati, they had 100 plus people at their convocation. The people, if they know what you are asking them to do, and they know why you're doing it, and they don't see this as a quote-unquote smoke screen for money, okay? And they know that you really are interested in their objectivity, and you know that you can really put forth an organized effort, and they can come and contribute. They are willing to support Catholic education. And so as you look, as we talk about that, I really want to share with you as we move on through this, the different steps, and you can see exactly where those different steps lie and why they are so important in terms of moving this forward. So let's move further. We find in a strategic growth plan a la a long-range strategic plan, there are 12 basic components. One is the assessment. Usually you're going to assess, okay, exactly what it is that you want to take a look at. Is this going to be an effort where you are going to seek input and assess all those 9 areas of student life, faculty, staff, spiritual life, academics, technology, athletics, governance and leadership? Are you going to facilities, development, marketing, enrollment management? That assessment. So that self-assessment usually. Usually there is a steering group, a steering committee of some 15 people that are going to be the hub of the planning process. And then obviously you do your research. And the research is great to do, the ultimate question beforehand. It is certainly important. It's also great to do some grassroots input in terms of holding input sessions with your faculty and staff, and holding input sessions with your parent groups, with your student groups. Remember we talked about input sessions at the last at one of the last lessons, and we talked about those input sessions asking what is impressive here at our school, what are those areas we need to take a look at improving in our school, what would you like to see in the future as you look down the road. And of course, tying into that, as you work with all of this, is, let's say, for example, you put together the steering committee, and that steering committee, 15 to 20 people, let's say, and let's say, we're just going to use this for example, where with this particular planning process, let's just say that we're going to use this one, that you had each steering committee member were going to co-chair one of those 9 areas. And so in terms of that, you would have 2 co-chairs for spiritual life, 2 co-chairs for faculty and staff growth, 2 co-chairs for student life growth. You'd have 2 co-chairs for academics, 2 for technology, 2 for athletics, 2 for administration finance, 2 for development and marketing, and 2 for facilities. So in terms of that, you then would take a look in making sure, as you have those chairs, you would want to put a team together for all of those 9 areas. And so the team members that you would invite, I've always encouraged to do the entire faculty and staff, having them serve in one of those 9 teams. I like to have my 2 chairs to be as objective as possible, but I'd like to invite parent leaders. I like to invite alumni leaders. I like to invite people that are familiar with the school, obviously all board members, all school advisory council members would be on it. And so each of those 9 teams is going to have anywhere between 8 and 12 people on each team. And so we've done this hundreds of times, and we know that it does work. But to set it up like this does take some organization. And so in terms of moving that piece forward, these 9 teams, the first thing we would ask them to do, based upon looking at the research and the surveys and the assessment work that was done ahead of time, these 9 teams then would do a SWOT analysis. So in terms of spiritual life, our Catholic identity, what presently are we strong in? What presently are we weak in? What are the future opportunities we have in this area? And what future threats do we have in this area? And based upon that whole SWOT analysis, that becomes important to move that forward. While all this is going on, the steering committee, which is usually comprised, obviously, of these folks coming from board and administration and your real leaders of the school, they're working on mission and vision, and we talked about that in lesson number 2. And so you're taking these 9 planning areas, and based upon the SWOT analysis, you're coming up with what challenges us in each of these planning areas. What are those challenges? And as we say in the book, we like those challenges to begin with, how can we? How can we? And so in terms of that, each team is going to work through the ability to come up with the challenges based upon the SWOT analysis that they have which is based upon the research and the assessment that was done prior to this. So this is more than likely a 6 to 8 month process to move on through this whole strategic planning process. So the articulation of the key challenges becomes really important. So let's say, for example, in advancement, development, marketing, planning area, maybe one of the weaknesses was the fact there's not enough alumni involvement. And so one of the challenges then could be, for example, we usually see this one a lot, how can we reach out, invite and involve and engage more of our alumni into the life of our school? Another challenge is, especially in the secondary school level, is how can we reach out and establish out-of-town/state alumni associations where we have a heavy concentration of our alums living. So each of those planning areas is going to come up with the challenges, and they're going to come up with solutions. And then once again, in terms of moving this forward, we like to close the strategic planning process with a big convocation or a big Congress. You can call it whatever you want, but in which you invite, for example, some people who are objective. So maybe in spiritual life, I've sat in on many of these. In spiritual life, maybe you have pastors from other parishes. I attended one recently where there was an Episcopalian minister, a Presbyterian minister, and a Lutheran minister, all in the spiritual life area. That was an interesting conversation, but very, very productive. Maybe in development and marketing, you're inviting other advancement directors, maybe on the university level, maybe on the high school level. Maybe you're inviting people who are from the nonprofit world to become involved. On the academic level, you're inviting quite possibly people from other schools, public, parochial, and private. On, as you deal with facilities, you're inviting other plant managers. You're inviting. So in other words, with the Congress, the convocation as we call it, you really are pulling in some objectivity that is so important. So your beginning stages are with your assessment and research, putting with the steering committee leading the way. They established we're using 9 planning areas for this class today. And with those 9 planning areas, you've got 2 chairs coming from the steering committee. You've got 8 or 10 people on each team. They've done the SWOT analysis. Based upon those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, they're creating 4 or 5 challenges in each of those planning areas. They're offering solutions in those areas, and that's usually done through 4 or 5 workshops. And then you're doing this big convocation where you're inviting the outside world to come in and help you solve those challenges. And that really is what you're asking people to do in the Congress. Solve the challenges, solve the challenges. But the great part about this is that they can solve the challenges by not having a horse in the race, so to speak. They don't necessarily, they don't necessarily have to have an idea where I've got to know everything about the school. You certainly provide them background information. You certainly do that, as we'll see. I know we have a bunch of questions that have come up on my screen, and I will definitely answer those questions. There's about 6 or 7 questions that came up. They are really good, and I will answer them at the end of this class. So these are the 12 basic steps in long-range planning, and the basic components. Now, the basic steps are, you've got step 1 is the steering committee and the school assessment, and that's on pages 62 and 63 in the book. They're the planning area teams and their focus, and that's on page 63 of the book. There is the strategic growth plan draft outline that we provide on page 64. There's the school-wide Congress convocation on page 64. And then there's the final strategic growth plan, a long-range strategic plan and implementation on pages 64 and 65. So these are the 5 major steps in terms of this. They're referred to. You have the ability with this process to engage a lot of people. You have in this process a wonderful way to create a vision. You have in this process a wonderful way to be able to move things forward where you can engage people. And let's go back to what we talked about earlier. Remember this next slide? This way we're talking about it now is all built around the 7 I's. You're identifying people that you want to invite on those planning teams for those 4 or 5 workshops. You're identifying those people who can provide objectivity at your Congress or at your convocation. They're both synonymous. You are informing them of what is being done, explaining the process. You're personally inviting them to become involved. They do become involved. Believe it or not, 50% plus will help you implement the plan when it's created, and they will feel that sense of investment and ownership. And obviously, this whole approach is about how can we continually improve our Catholic school. Once again, as we take a look, really, it is so important to realize the value of this as opposed to just putting together a plan with 15 or 20 people. It really plugs into what we see as being the real process of people engagement. And remember this next slide too, because I think we touched on this. Remember, we talked about Henry Nouwen's in the spirituality of fundraising. Remember, development is not a response to a crisis. It's a ministry. It's a way of announcing our vision and inviting other people. And that's what this process does, because without vision, we perish. Vision gives us the courage to speak when we might want to remain silent. How fantastic is it to have a plan of action with priorities that have engaged well over 100 or more people? And I always hear this, always. We're a small school. We only have 95 students. We live in a small community. There's no way we can get these numbers. I disagree. I've never worked or had conversations with or workshopped with any Catholic school, no matter how small, and not be able to get these numbers. No way. Once again, as we've talked about many times, you got to once again take a look at where are these new wine skins going to come from. And so as we move on through this, we'll get to those questions. Believe me, we'll get to those questions as we move forward. And in fact, maybe what we'll do is take a look at a couple of them right now. When inviting those first, second, and third ripples, what are success stories to help prevent gripe sessions? Many parents like me think they're great educators since they want to teach the teachers how to teach and what to teach. Well, if you do this process correctly, you really are focused. Believe me, you are really focused on inviting those people onto those planning areas. And when it comes to strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you really have a wonderful opportunity with that, to make sure that it's well facilitated by the steering committee, and make sure that as you take a look at all of that, that the people getting involved in the process are going, they're going to be involved in making sure that they follow the outline and the procedure and the process of what to do. There's sets of guidelines, there's an agenda for every meeting, and you probably have gotten all this out, in terms of having the surveys and the questionnaires done ahead of time. Usually on the steering committee, you are going to have people who are going to be facilitators. They're going to facilitate the process. They're not involved, in terms of their opinions with the process. So as we look at this, I think that we can, there's still some more questions that people have, that we'll certainly get to in just a minute. Let me move on to the next one as we talk about our development director. So lesson 13 says setting up that development director to succeed. And what we always see and say is that usually there are 7 reasons why development directors don't last, or advancement directors don't last more than a couple of years. And that's just the facts of it, is that lack of understanding, no written plan of action, no ongoing professional training, everything measured by money. How much money did you raise? How much money did you raise? How much money did you raise? Constantly running one fundraiser after the other. Lack of realization that development advancement takes time. And that's usually lack of realization on the part of the people who are in leadership positions. And little time spent recharging the battery. And that becomes important too, to make sure that happens. Tips for success, as you can see in the book, making sure that you're getting the education and the training. Really applaud those of you that are taking this course. This is not only going to give you credit in terms of a university, but also should be able to help you overall as you continue to grow your ministry. Tips for success is making sure that your administration and your board understand Catholic school development. We just opened up the spring semester course, and really interesting. Last night, I had a school that is going to require all of their board members to take the course. So everybody on the board has to take it. And as we said, they kept asking, do they have to attend every live class? And we said, no, you don't, but you certainly have to keep up with it. So they're going to have their whole board take the course. I mean, to me, that is a wonderful opportunity, for them to come to learn what development really is. Tips for success: make personal visits every week. Get out of your office. Get away from that computer. Don't just do the database. Don't just do the newsletter. Make those personal visits. I always say a development/advancement officer should be meeting eyeball to eyeball with 5 or 10 people every week, just to touch base, to share the strategic plan, to share the vision, to get input from somebody on something. Work from that written plan of action. We're going to cover that in another lesson of how to create that advancement plan, but work from a written plan so you know what you're doing. Encourage consideration when you get involved. It really does take several years for the advancement development roots to take in, and you grow from that. So I don't see how a school or a leadership of any school can bring a development advancement director in and say, okay, we're gonna take a look at the end of 1 year. Because if you do it right, then it does need to get some legs underneath it. Bond, as we talked about in a previous lesson, bond with the staff, the faculty and the staff. Make sure, as we talked about in the last lesson, to assemble and work with that core team. Word process that monthly update. We sent you a sample of that. But above all, listen as you do these personal visits every week. Make sure you're listening to people and what they have to say. Last night, I was part of a financial leadership dinner. And basically we had about 20 or 22 people who were invited to a restaurant. And basically, after feeding them, we opened up into a discussion in regards to some of the things that are going on with this particular school, all positive, but really the principal really probed in terms of them sharing their ideas and talk about their experiences. And most of these people were parents and alums. And so it was a wonderful conversation. Obviously, we invited their participation in the annual appeal, but we were very specific in what we invited them to do. In this particular school, their faculty professional growth opportunities have gone from 90% funding by the federal government to 10%. And so therefore we needed to present all that. So we presented these 12 conferences that faculty and staff members would like to attend, when they were, where they were, how many people the school would like to send, and how much each one cost. And we presented that. So very, very interesting in terms of moving that forward. And we also talked about technology upgrade for every classroom, and we presented those line items to do that in all 22 classrooms with a cost of around $8,000 to $9,000 per classroom. And this was all presented. And once again, very specifically asking these people to support this. And so it was a very specific piece. They all knew that we were going to invite their financial participation, but 90% of the evening was sitting there and them sharing their stories in terms of what they would like to see, and the principal asking questions about how could the school do better in this, and do better in this, and do better in this. It was a wonderful evening. It started at 6 o'clock, and we were all walking out of there at 8 o'clock. And so once again, that ability to continue to listen becomes really, really important. Make healthy choices, in terms of the ability to realize that you can't work 15 hours a day, and reward yourself. What we mean by that is take some time off. That ought to be a conversation with the administration beforehand. The ability, many times, development people, like last night, the advancement director was there, the development director was there, and once again, these were people that are going out in the evening, on the weekends, etc. So being able to build into that, kind of a good balance. Okay, Be responsible, but as we said, don't guard your kingdom. And what we mean by that is be open to suggestions. Be open to suggestions. So as we look at it, we hope that that lesson is one that is valuable because it does call to mind what we find from that lesson. Really was written by about 20 development/advancement directors in a way, because this is what we heard from them through the years. Lesson 14 is on pages 71 and 73. We just want to call this to your attention again, to create that master plan for fundraising events. And as you remember that plan, we just think it really is important. That whole lesson deals with how to do it. A previous lesson dealt with how to do it. So it kind of shows you the importance that we're placing on this. The ability to list the fundraising events that you do, who sponsors them, what month of the year, how much did it gross in the last time, how much did it net, how many people were involved in leadership, how many people hours did it take, and then with the little legend up at the top, with the key up at the top, who really has asked for the money. And so that really becomes important. We really encourage you, if you have not done this, to really take a look. And that would be all your fundraising events, every single one of them. And as you probably remember, we do not count the annual appeal, okay, as being a fundraiser. That is development dollars. We put that out by itself. So once again, as I said, we're only going to spend a few minutes on this because we covered it before, but please take a look at it. In lesson 15, that we'll begin part 1 in today's lesson, is all about enrollment management. And so obviously, as we have said many times, enrollment management is the single most important thing that a Catholic school can do. I've had administrators and clergy push back on that with me, but as I have often said, that is the most important thing. If you do not have students, you do not have a school. You could have the most wonderful theology program, the best religion program for pre-K through 8th grade, but if you don't have students in the classroom, you have nothing. And so you can build the greatest facilities, but you need to have students that are there. And you need to take a look at that as being probably the most important thing, as we said, in terms of your development marketing efforts. From day one, we say everyone who comes into your Catholic school should be educated. And we've talked about this before. This means your new faculty, your returning faculty, your new board members, your people who receive people in the school, your new school advisory council, your student leaders, your parent leaders. Everyone needs to know the top 10 selling points. And we've talked about this. We'll talk about it in this lesson. We'll talk about it later. It is a whole chapter in the book, and those could change every year. Making sure everyone understands the meaning and understands the value of enrollment management and what those specific roles are in the enrollment management efforts. It is not just enough for a faculty member to help with open house. She and he must become involved in helping market, promote, the school in terms of the circles that they travel. And so as you look at this, and we move it forward, we have a theme that we used in the Diocese of Buffalo. We called it Ambassadors for the Brand, that everyone needs to be an ambassador for the brand. And so let's look at this. We're going to divert a little bit from the book, but it stems off of the book. So in terms of that, this is what we're talking about, okay? As we talk about the word ambassador, just because a person is a parent or a faculty member or a board member, that doesn't automatically translate into being an ambassador. I mean, ambassadors are invited, they're nurtured, they're trained, they're encouraged, they're directed. We also need to understand what we mean by branding, ambassadors for the brand, okay? The brand are your verbal, what you talk about, your top 10 selling points, your mission, okay, your verbal elements and images, and your visual elements and images. So as we talk about ambassador for the brand, how can a faculty member or a parent or a board member be an ambassador if they don't know what they are going to promote and how they're going to promote it and the ways they're going to promote it? And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So why is this so important? Because as we look at the ways we've always done it, and these are good, this is not negative here. We have done things like this where we have our mission statements, our promo literature, but we have very few people serving as year-round ambassadors. Notice the two words together, hyphenated, year-round. Okay? Open house, visits to feeder sources. We all do these. Signs and flyers and posters and yard signs and direct mail and shadow days and tours and follow-up phone calls on our website. We've done this. Our show, social media, neighborhood parties, yard signs, parish presentations, and the list goes on of effective tactics. Nothing's wrong with what we're talking about. However, there's one thing that many Catholic schools need to do better, and that is we need to develop our critical mass. Our critical mass. Now, watch what I mean by this, all right? A very important, a crucial stage of a Catholic school's development where the activity acquires, now here are the key words, self-sustaining viability is when that school reaches critical mass. It is believed then that you can prevail and not just survive. Another way of looking at it is this. Critical mass is the size or number that a Catholic school needs to reach before particular change or development can happen. I love that definition because it really zeroes in on where many Catholic schools need to go to. We have some that are there, but most need to go there. And unfortunately, there are a number that have not been introduced to this concept. Critical mass is the size or number that a Catholic school needs to reach before particular change or development can happen. If we keep the light under the bushel, if only 20 people are the ones who are promoting and talking positively about the school, if we only let our marketing and enrollment management and marketing team and open house people know what messages to carry forth, if we don't have our board members get on the phone, and this, I've used this before, I'm going to use it again. If you don't have your school advisory council, your board members, if they're not getting on the phone once a month and calling the families in your school, okay, and introducing themselves, what if you gave every board member, a school advisory council member, 5 families or 6 families or 7 families every month, and you invited them to call other families in the school just to introduce themselves? We've talked about this before, but this is what we mean by this, developing that critical mass, engaging people, dropping the pebble in the pond, getting more people that are involved. We're talking about the people who are willing to step forward and be those ambassadors for the brand. Unfortunately, as we've seen, that has not happened. And so the key question is, how many people actively promote your Catholic school? I think that becomes a real key question that you should ask right now. How many people, and the key word is actively, promote your Catholic school? Actively. How many people know exactly what to promote and market year to year? So those are 2 very important questions as you move forward. And then what is the message? Okay? As we know, there are many traditional ways, but the most effective way of sharing that message is eyeball to eyeball. One-on-one, small group, large group. In many cases, we as the leaders, okay, are not there in those sessions. So therefore, those ambassadors need to be educated on what to say. So interaction and relationship building are the keys to building your brand. What's the message? Once again, we believe it's important that every Catholic school has 10 key points to promote, sell, and shout out to all publics every year. And they may change. You're not going to change all 10, but you may change, tweak 1 or 2 every year. But what do you want to promote? What do you want? What is it that you want to brag about? What is it that you want to really get out there and shout out to everyone? And so the 10 points, how to create those 10 points, that's in the book. Okay, they need to be built. This is not something where the principal and 2 or 3 other people sit down in someone's office and said, with the enrollment management director and the marketing committee and say, okay, these are the things we're going to promote this year. They need to be built. You need input from your board. You need input from your faculty. You need input from your student leaders. You need input from your parent leaders. And that's on page 77 of the book, how to build that. So these are the key ambassadors that these are not automatic. They need to be built. They need to be trained. They need to be educated. Your administration, your board, all those working in admissions, marketing, development, advancement, enrollment management, all faculty who come in to be interviewed, all of those support staff members, student leaders, the ability to the parent leaders, all of these are key ambassadors, alum leaders parish leaders, if applicable in your situation, community members who get involved with you. Remember, these key ambassadors need to be invited to share the messages of the brand. This is development and advancement and marketing today in 2017 and will be in the future vastly different than the way we've done this in the past. So therefore, as we move forward, here's some samples, and I think you're really going to like this, because this is when we work and see this with schools who are doing this. We gave these to the Diocese of Buffalo a couple of weeks ago. These are things your ambassadors can do, especially parents, especially alums, especially board members. And you'll get this PowerPoint in the next couple of days. Okay. So let's say you had a little card or form and said, these ambassadors, I'll promote my school through sharing the top 10 selling points with prospective parents and by inviting parents to schedule a school visit or come to an open house. I could check off maybe that I'll write a letter to prospective families identifying benefits they will receive at the school. Maybe I'll share 3 specific signs of excellence within each of the following 4 areas: spiritual life, development, academic, co-curricular, and extracurricular. Maybe I could check the box that said I'll support open houses or information sessions as one more way for prospective students and families to take another firsthand look at the school. You're showing people how you want them to help you, instead of just saying, okay, here are 10 selling points, go promote. No, there's a way to do it. I'd be willing to serve as a parent telecounselor for my school. In this role, I'd occasionally contact parents or prospective students, a list provided, to discuss with them the educational wants and needs they have for their son or daughter and how our school meets those needs. I'd be willing to host a coffee informational night in my home. I'll be willing to serve on a news bureau that meets periodically. As a member of this bureau, my primary responsibility would be to help surface PR topics for my school and will assist in the writing of these news releases. I'll be willing to be a featured parent on our school's website. I'll be willing to serve on our school's core team. I'll be willing to help ensure verbal, vocal communication with prospective students and families occurs on a regular basis many times in my parish. These are all ways. These are very specific, practical ways where you can have your ambassadors help you, rather than saying, these are the top 10 selling points we all agreed upon. Now, please go promote the school. No, it's sort of like telling the development director, all right, listen, advancement director, we want you to raise an additional $50,000 in the annual appeal next year. But what don't we tell her or him? How to do it. So these are some how-tos. These are some how-tos. None of this works without having the 10 points to sell. That's why those 10 points are so valuable and so important. How to use those top 10? All the messages now. Look at the ways. Informal conversations, answering phones in social settings, an open house. When Catholic schools get people on their campus at donor functions and phone conversations, the list goes on and on and on and on. These are vocal messages that create the critical mass. So here's some questions as we wrap this one up. Part 1, why should selling, marketing a Catholic school rest only with the people who are assigned to market it or hired to market it? Why should the only time people delve into what to sell take place before open house? How valuable would it be to have hundreds of ambassadors for your brand each year? When all the messengers share the same message, then critical mass takes over and a Catholic school grows in reputation. It is so important, this piece. So when we come back to the next lesson, okay, in 2 weeks, we're going to go to part 2, and part 2 is going to delve into things from the book. But I wanted to share this with you. We shared this in the Diocese of Buffalo 2 weeks ago. I had 2 really good sessions with all those schools, and I felt this resonated because this is really nuts and bolts. This is how to. This is a concept of critical mass. That concept of getting ambassadors for the brand, understanding who an ambassador is, understanding what the brand is, understanding the top 10 selling points, understanding who makes good ambassadors, and then being able to move this forward in terms of saying, hey, these are ways that you as ambassadors in our enrollment management effort can certainly help in terms of moving us forward. So in this lesson, key points is long-range strategic planning or strategic growth planning is an outstanding way to invite and involve your entire Catholic community. Number 2, make sure your development advancement director is able to win. Make sure you set them up to succeed. You know, number three, take control of your fundraising events. That's the chart as you move from this fundraising culture to a development advancement culture. Number four, enrollment management is everyone's responsibility. And the best approach to managing your enrollment and proactively marketing your school is by building that critical mass. Hopefully, we were able to bring that apart to you today. So homework is on this slide. So many people have said, hey, we're busy time of the year, so we've made the homework assignment for class 6. Very easy. Make a selection from one of the following. Write a 1 to 2 paragraph response to how important is a Catholic school's long-range strategic plan to the development advancement efforts, and in what ways can this long-range strategic plan be used in our development advancement efforts? 1 or 2 paragraph response to that. Or write a 1 or 2 paragraph response to how is my Catholic school building critical mass so we can have hundreds of ambassadors for the brand. Really wanted to make your homework assignment short, sweet. You can knock one of these out. You want to do both of them, that'll be great. But you need to do one of them, and we felt that this was something that would take you 15, 20 minutes to do, and that's the homework for class number 6, because we felt that some of you were having trouble to keeping up, and we had some stuff coming in at the last minute, so we wanted to share that with you. So as we take a look at this, as we move from class 5 to 6, you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint, the YouTube video link, any supplementary materials that I'm going to send you, the go-to webinar link for class 6, which will be on Monday, November 6th, okay, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. A reminder of your homework, which is on slide 46, and I'll remind you of that homework again. And so once again, please email that homework assignment, and please have it to us by the end of the day. And of course, that is the wrong date. That should be have it to us by that Friday before the Monday, okay? So I'll correct that and send that in the PowerPoint. So as we look at this, moving to class 6, we're going to spend a lot of time. This is all really about marketing and enrollment management, the next class on November 6th. That will be part 2 of this enrollment management piece. And then we're going to jump into understanding the value of your wow, which usually grows out of your top 10 selling points, which ties directly into your enrollment management, which allows your ambassadors for the brand to make sure they know what the wow is so they can promote it. All of this ties together. Every single thing ties together. So let's answer some questions, because I know that there are some questions. And as we take a look at those questions, let me go back to the top. Let's see here. Sometimes these questions are hard to read because of the small type. What planning areas do we recommend? Those coming out of the national standards benchmarks are the 9 areas that we are talking about. You know, it all depends upon the school. Really is key. I mean, we've done both. I mean, it depends on the situation, you know, whether we want to use all 9 or whether we want to use the 4, operational vitality, mission and Catholic identity, leadership and governance, and academic excellence. You have guidelines in that book from NCEA that you can get on how to do that. We've used, it's about 50-50, so I really can't answer that. Are we still planning to do a summer session at the University of Dayton? Yes, we are. And we'll give you information about that here pretty soon. So a couple of other questions here. How much should we involve the faculty and staff in the long-range strategic planning process? Well, I think they all need to be on one of those planning teams in those 4 or 5 workshops. I think that it really becomes something that you need to engage them. You need to take a look at how important it is, and then to be part of that. You don't want to create a long-range strategic plan and then have somebody say, when did they decide to do that? You want them to make them part of the process, because they're stakeholders, and they're people that really need to be involved. They, as I've said before, the faculty and staff are the most important people in terms of your development, advancement, strategic planning efforts. Because when you engage them, then you're going to find that they have a little better bounce in their step, so to speak. Okay. Okay. There's several other questions, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. As we take a look at reviewing all of the input that comes in from this lesson, as we take a look at that input, I will look at all those questions and those ones that I feel that are really important to come back to you and answer, because we have so many. I'm not going to have time to do it, and I don't want to keep y'all beyond the 3 o'clock Eastern time hour, which it is right now. So I'll get back with you on those. There is not a survey today. There is not a survey that you have to answer in terms of any of those questions, but we will be sending out this information. Also, by the way, we just sent out the promotion for the spring class, which will begin in January and end in May. And we sent that out yesterday. In fact, we already have 40 or 50 students registered already. So if you know of anyone, I probably will send you the link to that class. So I know several of you have asked, could I send you that link so you could forward it to some of your colleagues and friends? We certainly will do that. We'll also get all this information out to you either Friday or Saturday in regards to the PowerPoint and everything of this nature. And very definitely, we will be doing that on-site workshop at the University of Dayton this summer. I'll be meeting with Sister Angela here over the next several weeks and hope to nail down those dates and times and costs and everything like that. Right now, just to let you know, what we're looking at is to really dig down deep in 4 or 5 areas. One of those areas would be how to set up the right organization for your advancement, but really how to pull off a successful annual appeal. Number 3, how to make sure you have an enrollment management plan that is really going to work. And number 4, how to make sure your strategic plan for advancement development is one that will help you to move forward. And then the other piece is that culture piece. So we're going to dig down deep on all of that. And it'll be like a week-long course, class. It'll be like going back to college. So hopefully some of you will be able to join it. It will only be open to those people who have taken this class. So those who took the class last year in that pilot program in the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee, and those students who took it online, as well as you in the fall semester, as well as those people who were in the spring semester. Those will be the only people invited because we feel that you would have a good background and you'd know the language and what we're talking about, and you'd understand the philosophy. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of y'all. We also will be at the NCEA convention in Cincinnati this spring and hope to have a little reception for those of you that might be there. And, oh, yeah, by the way, NCA, Wade Marshall from NCA just contacted me yesterday and said that the workbook is now ready. And so we'll be sending out something on that next week in case you want to get the workbook, because we will require the textbook and the workbook be purchased from NCEA for the spring course. So anyway, hopefully this has helped you. This enrollment management piece is so crucial, so important. I always love talking about it because there's so many things that can happen, very practical. That's why we wanted to give you those practical examples. So hope you have a great day, a great week, and as we move on forward, we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks with the next class, with class number 6, continue on with enrollment management, and really talk about that wow. So thank you for being with us today. Hopefully it has been valuable. God bless. Thank you.